I'm Ramat Rahel, Assistant Professor of Classics and Religious Studies here at the University of Iowa. And on behalf of tonight's co-sponsors, the University of Iowa Department of Religious Studies, the University of Iowa Department of Classics, the Agudas Hakim Congregation, and the Biblical Archaeology Society, I'd like to welcome you all here tonight to the latest lecture in our Colloquium series featuring Professor Oded Lipschits. Dr. Oded Lipschits is Professor of Jewish History, Director of the Sonia and Marco Nadler Institute of Archaeology, and Head of the International MA Program in Ancient Israel Studies in the Department of Archaeology and Ancient Near Eastern Cultures at Tel Aviv University in Israel. Professor Lipschits' research focuses on the history and administration of Judah and the Judeans under Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian rule. In conjunction with this, he has published profusely on stamp jar handles and is currently co-authoring a critical and historical commentary on the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, together with Professor Gary Knoppers at Penn State University. He has directed 6 seasons of excavations at the site of Ramat Rahel between 2004 and 2010. And since 2010, he has been the director of the Ella Valley Regional Project and the Lautenschläger Azekah Expedition, together with Yuval Gadol of Tel Aviv University and Professor Manfred Erming of Heidelberg University. And this is the excavation in which Iowa students have participated. Professor Lipschits is the recipient of numerous grants and prizes, among them the Alexander von Humboldt Grant in 2002-2003, the Israel Science Foundation Grant from the Israel Academy of Sciences, both in 2008 and 2011, the G. Ernest Wright Award from the American Schools of Oriental Research for the most substantial volume dealing with material culture from the Ancient Near East for the 2012 book, the Yehud Stamp Impressions, together with David Vanderhoof, and the German Israel Foundation Grant in 2015 to 2017 for the research on Assyrian siege ramps, with Tel Azekah, which you'll see tonight as a case study. He sits on editorial boards of a number of scholarly journals and scientific publishers. His list of publications includes more than 100 scientific papers, many additional items, encyclopedias, numerous short notes and popular articles, including the next issue of Biblical Archaeology Review, which is due out shortly. Yes. 12 primary and high school students, books for primary and high school books in Israel, 9 scholarly books, including one that my Jerusalem students will know, The Fall and Rise of Jerusalem, History of Judah Under Babylonian Rule. And in addition to all of this, he mentors 50 MA students and 20 PhD students. Most importantly, Oded is one of the kindest men you'll ever meet, and one of the most enthusiastic scholars you'll ever hear speak about archaeology. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor to introduce my good friend, Professor Oded Lipschits.
Well, I think that the best thing I could do now is to run out and go home. So nothing can be better. In the coming kind of hour, we'll see if you'll be asleep. I will make it shorter. I'm going to split my talk to 3 main parts. Very short introduction to the methodology of biblical history. Also a short introduction to what is archaeology. And not only what is archaeology, but what is modern archaeology. What is the revolution that archaeologists from my age, in the last 10, 15 years made to make archaeology totally different than it was 10, 15 years ago. And with some case studies about what archaeology can let us know about the biblical history. And then to the dessert, a little bit information about our Azeka project that students from Iowa and Bob especially contributed so much in the last year that we had. Bob, do you want to close some of the lights here?
Oh. Yeah, we called and asked for one, and
but I will try more. So, I will start with a very short introduction. And I want to tell you that I'm a historian, and I'm dealing with biblical history, and for me, archaeology, like biblical texts, are sources for better understanding of the history of Judah and the Judeans in the biblical period. So when we are talking about the history, we have two main sources that we can learn about the biblical history. The first one is the Bible. And I can tell you that the biblical research is a very old and well-based research with many well-developed methodologies, very long tradition of modern research. And since, the text is well known, and not many changes, so we have many slow and very graduate developments in it, and not many breakthrough and exciting studies, but from time to time we have the jumps and we have changes, but it's a very, let's say, conservative field of research. However, when we are moving to archaeology, this is what I call the little brother of the bad boy of research, because you never know when you're coming to dig a site, you never know what you'll find. You never know what is hiding there, few centimeters below the surface. And not only this, but also, this is a very young field of research. And we have many methodologies that are still developing, that are still new. And when we are combining it, and we combine the surprising find that you have all the time, and the new methodologies, and also, if I can say, the different character of the many archaeologists, I think that we have a kind of a wild field, in many cases very problematic from the methodological perspective of people who are not always differentiating between facts and interpretations. And in some cases you can read in some journals about the interpretation and people think that these are facts. But in any case, these are the two main sources that me and my students are using in order to develop our understanding on what is biblical history. Now, few methodological notes about what is archaeology. When you are coming to Israel and you see these hills, for example, this wonderful site of Tel Azeka, or this nice site of Tel Megiddo, Armageddon, or nice site of Tel Chatzor, or even if you see this site of Tel Yokneam, you can think that these are natural hills. Since all over the world you have such hills which are natural. But Israel and the Levant are one of the only places that these are not natural hills. These are artificial sites, this is why we call them tel, that are combined by levels of people who came again and again and again to the same place, settled in these places, and the remains that they left are the reason why you have kind of a hill which is artificial. So basically what we have is that people came in the beginning to a place, and they came there because there were water, there was a kind of a way to protect the site, it was a kind of strategic place, located in a strategic place, and they built their own very, let's say, place to live. They could live there few dozens years, maybe a few hundreds of years, and then it was destroyed. Usually we have some gaps, but then people came again to the same place for the same reasons. They lived there some time, and then again destruction. And then some other people came, and some other people came, and we have, some finds from today. And the mission of archaeologists is basically to come, and you can imagine cream cake. So just to take out layer after layer after layer, and to understand what was there, when it was, what happened. And this is basically the fact. And we can do it in two ways, as I will show you. We can take layer after layer, or to cut it like a cream cake and to see the different layers from the section. However, it's not so easy, because usually, this is very nice, but usually it's more like this. You have pits, and not all the time it's horizontal, and you have many many problems in this way of excavation. So what is the methodology that most archaeologists are dealing? We are digging in squares. The Israeli way is 5 meters on 5 meters. The American way is 10 meters on 10 meters, but squares. And in the squares, we can see the horizontal phase here, and we can see the section here, and learn about the two sides of this site. So this, for example, 4 squares that we have in Tel Azeka. We just cleaned the surface, and we went down to the Persian period. This is a village from the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, 5th century BC, in Tel Azeka. These are the houses. These are the bulks that we have between the squares, so we can see the sections. And we go deep. This is the same thing that we do when we are excavating in slopes. So we can see the horizontal side and the section themselves. And this is, for example, the section that we have, again, in Tel Azeka, that mainly we needed to know about the history of the site through the sections. So we can learn from the pottery, we can learn from carbon-14, and we have a lot of data from the section themselves. And again, usually where people are coming and they're digging squares and they're going down, and suddenly they have a wall of mud bricks. So archaeologists leave it as it is, and they go down and down. Here you can see already that this wall is 3 different walls, one above the other. And at the end, this is an area with 8 squares. 8 squares. So in many cases, we decide to take out the bulks. So basically, when you're coming to this place, you will see it like this. So this is a bulk, and this is a bulk, and this is a bulk, but you can see that the bulk here was removed. You can still see the wet surface. But these are walls of structures that were discovered in the excavation. So this is basically all what we need to know about archaeology. This is the methodology. Now, what we are looking for, beside this architecture of, the find of the buildings, we are not looking for this. So of course it's very nice to find treasures, like gold, and this is again from Tel Azeka. 2 seasons ago, my wife found it when she came to excavate. And this is from the destruction level of the Canaanites, of the late Bronze people, sometime in the middle of the 12th century BC. But this is not something that we're looking for because it's very rare. And usually you don't find it. What we're looking for is this. Broken pieces of pottery. And we find every day thousands of them. And at the end of every season, we have hundreds of thousands of them. And the reason why we look for this is very simple. We can find some nice and complete vessels, which is very exciting. But usually we find it in destructions. And you can see here a wall that was destroyed and the pottery that was smashed below the wall. Now, why we are looking for this? We are looking for this because it's very cheap. You can make all the time new pottery, and because all the time it's cheap and it can be broken, and you can make a new one. So all the time we have new types of pottery, and this is something that we can date. So every archaeologist can date the pottery that he finds, sometime in the kind of frame of, let's say, 20 to 50 years, sometimes up to 100 years. But when we see it, we can say, okay, this is 9th century BC, this is 7th century BC. We know how to date it, and also we can see the function of the place. So if, for example, it's jars, so it's a storage. If it's cooking pots, so it's a kitchen or something. So we can learn a lot from the pottery. And what we do is we are collecting all the pottery, broken pottery pieces from every location. We bring it to this wonderful place. This is my dream, with usually women who knows how to deal with it. And they are taking the pottery from every location, we call it locus, and they start building it again and create the vessels that were broken. And then when they have it, we can start learning it. We can start doing all kinds of scanning, digital scanning on it. And when we do it, we can have a reconstruction of the complete vessels. And then we draw it. And then we can compare it to different other vessels. And we can not only date it, but we can also learn a lot about the connections. We know what is the origin of the mud, of the clay, so we can know where it was produced. And we have a lot of understanding only from this pottery. So this is really the secret of archaeology. This is what we're looking for. But I can tell you that everything that I told you until now was known already in the end of the 19th century for this genius, Sir Flinders Petrie, who came from Egypt to Israel. And he understood the two main things that I told you now, the stratigraphy of the sites and the way that we can date according to pottery. He was such a genius, this Flinders Petrie, that when he died, he was buried in Jerusalem, and this is his grave that every archaeologist is coming to take photo and to be, but he decided to give his brain to science. But it was 1942, the middle of the Second World War, so they put the head in a storage in Jerusalem, and they forgot about it, and they lost the tag, and only many years later it was discovered, and the head of the Sir Flinders Petrie with a brilliant brain came back to science. But I can tell you that I have many doubts, because I don't believe that when you die and someone is taking out your head, your hair become black, your nose become different, and your ears become totally different. So I have nothing to say about this genius after he died, but before he was a real genius. So if everything is known, I have a question: what is new? So the first thing that is new is that we understood that archaeology is not one man's show, but archaeology nowadays is a thing of many students who should work together, and not only many students who should work together. And again, in Azeka we have 100 people every week in the excavation because we need these people. But the secret is to have very good staff. I'm talking about 20 to 30 experts. One of them is Iowa student. And we had some more in this season. And each one of them is an expert on a very specific thing. And what we are doing, especially in Azeka, we are leading in it. Every find that we have is going to MA student, and this is his MA thesis. And every subject is going to be developed by a student. So we have until now only 6 seasons in Azeka. We have already 16 MA theses, and we have about 20 papers built on this research and built on these students. But the basic thing is that each one of these experts is giving us or contribute to us in a very specific thing. For example, there are 1 or 2 people, this is a Scottish guy and one was an Israeli guy, and they are giving us the way of a very detailed measures and drawing of every stone that we find in the excavation. So what we have is that we are giving a 3D photo of every wall and every stone and everything that we have in the excavation. So we can bring back everything, and everything is in a 3D, the exact point. And this thing we can take afterwards and make a drawing in the computer. And then we can dig in the computer every layer and differentiate between every layer. And if we put on it the finds, the dots are every piece of pottery that we have. So we can bring back to the same level every find that we have, and then we can go back and say, okay, this is Hellenistic, and this is Iron Age, and this is a late bronze, this is Middle Bronze, and here we have a storage, and here we have different things. So first of all, we have people who are giving us this option, and then we have different scholars who are doing, for example, more scientific things, like this German student who wrote about pottery, and this American Cuban origin student who wrote about the residue analysis. I will show you a few things about it in a minute. And this Australian student who wrote about carbon-14. And again, we'll talk about the importance of each thing in a minute, but Beside it, we have much more simple but very important other things, like, for example, this Israeli student who is in charge on sifting. Now, imagine that until a few years ago, every bucket with soil was thrown out. We have hills of, soil that was thrown from Megiddo and from other excavations. People just used to take even trains and just throw the soil out. But nowadays, we are sifting everything, and in some cases also we do wet sifting. So we take all these buckets and we put them on a plate, and in many cases we wash them with water, and then we do what we do, picking. So we are going very slowly in the evening and do the picking. And in many cases we sit all the people together, and with brushes we are looking for carbon, for all kinds of seeds and all kinds of other finds. And suddenly we have a new field in archaeology of learning about beads. Before this sifting, people found beads only in graves or in unique finds. Now we know that we have hundreds of beads all over. And it's a new field, and every stone came from a different place and was made by different technique. So we have a lot of things to learn only from this. We have small things like this, which is in the size of my nail, that was found in Jerusalem by the sifting project of the city of David. And this is a pomegranate made of ivory. Or again, we have a lot of bule that we find because of the sifting. What's bule? It's a small piece of clay that used to seal documents. So when you find bule, it means that there was a document before. And someone, which is administrator, scribe, could seal with a private seal. This piece of clay, these are original documents with bule. This is how it looks, still with a string, in it. And this is the backside that you can still see the signs of the papyrus that was there. So it was signing a document. So when people are finding such nice bule with name of scribes, some of them well known from the Bible, some of them we know them, so it's really, really, really important. But not only bule, because when we start to sift, a new thing was found, which is, what this? Fish bones. In every site in Judah we find thousands of fish bones. Now, when you'll come to visit Judah, you'll discover that there is no sea in Judah. So all these fish bones were brought from the Nile, from the Mediterranean, and it means that people had commerce, people had the money to pay for it. So again, this is so important for the trade relations, for the contacts that they had, what kind of fish they had. For example, even if we have indication that in Judah they were using to eat very kosher food, when we're coming to the fish, many of these fish are not kosher. So people in Judah, in Jerusalem, used to eat fish. Many of what they ate is not kosher. And again, we can start thinking and developing all kinds of ideas about all these things. And one of the results for what I'm saying is that we understand different the history of, for example, Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem. Just for letting you understand where we are, this is the city of David and the Temple Mount. Just to locate you, this is what we call the Kidron Valley, which is the eastern side of the city of David. And this is the Teropion, the western valley, that is the western border of the city of David. And above it we have the Temple Mount. In the middle we have what we call the Ophel. And down there we have the city of David. So this is basically the geography of the site. And this is what we say, the original Jerusalem from the biblical period. By the way, it's such a small place that not more than, let's say, 1,000 people could live there. So 1,000 people, 250 men could live there. So in this Jerusalem, the city of David, when you can see it, and now this is a large city, but this is the original Jerusalem. This is a kind of reconstruction, the Temple Mount, the Ophel area, and the city of David itself. you have one spring, the Gihon spring, which is here. And it was discovered by the excavator of the city of David that around this spring, which is a very small spring, not so big, there were many different systems to collect the water. One of them was a pool that was excavated by Ramat Rahel and Eli Shukron, and they understood that sometime in the late 9th, early 8th century BC, this pool went out of use, and someone used it to build here on the pool his house. But it was very high, so he put a lot of fill of soil and rocks in order to make it, you know, that the house would be only in the upside or upper part of this pool. So they took all the material from below and they sifted it. And what they found here is many bule. It means that in the 9th century in Jerusalem, someone knew how to write, and someone had all kinds of contacts. And this is the first slide that we have about someone living, you know, maybe 50, 70 years after the time of David and Solomon in Jerusalem, with scribes who knew how to write, and they had all kinds of documents, and they sealed them with bule, which one of them has a very impressive seat, probably with a symbol of God on this chair. And there are many indications. Is it the sign of Yahweh? Is it the sign of, you know, the God of Jerusalem? In others, you have kind of proto-holy capitals. In other, we have, can you see something here? This is a kind of Phoenician boat, like here, on the same bule. So it's something that probably came from Phoenicia. And here you can see kind of hieroglyphs from Egypt. So already in the 9th century, Judah had many connections with many different places. There were scribes. So again, if we're coming to reconstruct the history of Jerusalem, this is essential. I'm coming back to archaeology. What we're doing now in archaeology is we are working with metal detectors. And if 10, 15 years ago, coins were discovered only in hoards, and people thought that, you know, usually in antiquity, usual people didn't have coins. Now we have coins all the time, everywhere, in every place that we are digging. So everyone had his own, you know, treasure or some coin that he kept, you know, under the floors. And under the floor is very good because when he left, we can come and find it. So we have many coins everywhere, including that we can find some treasures. This, for example, for Ramat Rahel, it's a kind of columbarium. It's a kind of cave to have pigeons in it. But someone was hiding around between 17 and 12 BC, which is a very important period in history. Someone was hiding here a small cooking pot. He covered it with another piece of cooking pot, and inside it there were 18 coins of the half shekel, which is the coin that Jews used to bring to the temple. So someone was hiding these coins, and someone didn't come to take it back in this disturbing period in the history of Jerusalem. And again, we find it, and now history can be, you know, reconstructed based on these finds. Coming back to archaeology, nowadays we work with DNA. And DNA is part of what we are doing in archaeology. We have people who are responsible for taking DNA samples. So it's DNA of people, and then of course we can know about the relationship between people and about the origin of people, you know, when we compare it to DNA of people in the world, but also DNA of animals. So for example, when we are checking the DNA of the pigs' bones that we have in Israel, we can understand that many of the pigs that we have, for example, of the Philistines, is DNA of pigs that they brought from Turkey, and they are not locals. And again, many historical questions are coming, and many different reconstructions can be made. But not only DNA, but also we are collecting samples for carbon-14. And when we are coming with the experts that are having this carbon-14, we have an exact date for every level that we are excavating. So this is, for example, an area in Azeka, and we are taking samples of, especially we like olive pits, because olive pits, it means 1 year. And when you get the date, it's not, for example, a wooden beam. They can, you know, people can reuse it for many years. So we have an exact date for every one of these periods, and we can know exactly what are the dates, not only the relative dates, but also the absolute dates. And nowadays it's a huge project, and it's a huge part of what we do in archaeology, and then of course we can publish it, and we can learn from it, and we can compare it between the different sites, and now carbon-14 is a huge thing in archaeology. But not also only carbon-14, but also now we are dealing, and I'm using a lot of this thing, what is paleomagnetism? I'll not start with it because it's a different lecture, but this is becoming now a very important tool of dating and measuring, and we have papers on it. Even in PNAS we published something about Azeka, and we can date each one of these finds. We can have the exact measure of the paleomagnetism of it, and in a few years it will become a standard way to date pottery and to date other things. It's becoming very important, and paleomagnetism nowadays is an important thing. And nearly at the end of this thing, just to show you the power of archaeology in modern days, how many experts we have in the different excavations, and how important it is. This is, for example, our student Vanessa. Now she's writing a PhD, and she's doing residue analysis. It means that she is taking samples from every pottery vessel that we worked on it in the restoration lab, and she's taking the samples from different parts that we know that the liquids were in it. And she can take from the pottery and know what was the liquid that was stored in the vessel. And we know that in some cases it's different kinds of plant oils. And we know that in some cases it's honey. And we know that in some cases it was animal fat. People used to cook animal fat and store it. And in many cases it's wine, and we can even know what kind of wine we have there. And again, it's a very powerful tool for understanding the relations, to understanding what was in every house. And imagine that when we bring all this data together to even one house that we excavated, this is a very strong tool to reconstruct history. And I want to finish with two more examples. One of them is what we like very much. I call it CSI archaeology. Because you should understand that archaeology is very problematic in long periods without destructions. Because if there is a house or a settlement that was not destroyed for hundreds of years, and people used to clean it, so when we are coming to excavate it, we'll find nothing. Because it's clean. So maybe in some cases they had some reconstruction, they added a room, they changed it, we can see it. But if they have hundreds of years without destruction, archaeology can understand nothing about it. However, destructions, this is something that archaeologists like very much. Because destruction, it means that the material culture of the last minute before the destruction was frozen. And if we're coming to destruction, we can clean the upper side of it, and then everything is there. So I will just show you an example of destruction from around 1140 BC in Tel Azeka, one room. And it's an amazing project we have. Now, this is the paper that we have in the coming bar on this destruction. So we saw that we have a house. This is only one room of the house. That the second floor collapsed on the first floor. And we started to clean, and of course every vessel was marked and everything was documented. And slowly we started to see that we have the whole family buried there. And believe me, this is the floor that was the surface of this place for 3,000 years. So it was on the surface, only a few centimeters below it. So this is the house with the 4 people that were there. And I'll just show you the example of one of them that we still found him. He tried to find refuge, and he was just leaning on near a wall, holding 2 horns of a cow, in each one of his hands, and the wall collapsed on him, and this is how we found him, still holding the horns of the cow. And here we have some other, but here we found a girl that it was clear to us that this is a case that we should find, because she was holding the gods of the house in her hands, The people who work with us can tell us that she was already had one broken hand, and she was trying to go out from the house when the roof collapsed on her. So we started to remove the roof with the huge jars that just collapsed on her and broke her back. And then we started to see, the body of her with the, the position that she was in this same minute. 14, 15 years old girl, that's it. And then we can, just with the CSI, research, what was there, how old she was, what happened to her, what was the fire, what was the heat that she was burned after this destruction, everything about it. We know that she had anemia. She didn't have enough food. She worked very hard because we can see it on the bones. So everything, including the connections between this girl and the other members of the family. So it's really amazing. And then we can come back and we can say that she was here. And we can say that she had anemia. And we can say that she was burned in 940 Celsius degrees, and very close to her there was another person. And she, this guy was trying to find a refuge. And he was also not very, people were not so healthy in this time. All the time they didn't have enough food. They worked very hard, physically very hard. So all of them were very young. So, and again, everything is there. This is horrible because we found a person who tried to block with his hands the falling of the roof. And we still found the hands, between the collapse of the roof. So there. And again, we can say what's going on every one of them. And this is really an amazing, amazing information that we are collecting. And together with all the other things that we have, this is really an amazing tool to reconstruct the history not only of this location, but the history of the region and the history of the land and the history. Last example, also with a lot of historical and important information, is our ability to use research with pollen. Pollen, this is this thing of the flowers that in the spring, not all of you are very happy with. Or the allergic people. Yeah, I can see some of you already starting to be nervous. And we have an expert in it, Dr. Daphna Langwood, great scholar. And she can recognize every pollen has its own shape. And this is a strong material that can last in nature for thousands of years. So we excavated in Ramat Rahel an unbelievable nice palace. It was one of the unique palaces that ever existed with a very nice Pottery capitals. We excavated for 6 years together with the University of Heidelberg, with many students from all over the world. We know exactly the history of it, and we published a lot of books on it, and it was really interesting thing. It was a very unique architecture with these huge capitals. And they were in the entrances of the palace. And what we also found there is, you see how it was. We found window balustrades, which is amazing because we knew that in the ancient Near East they had window balustrades, because in the ancient Near East we find a lot of ivory with a woman in the window. And all the windows that we have in the ivories is a window just like we found in Ramat Rahel, but it's the only place that actually this thing was found. So you see many, many of these women in the window. In every museum you'll find them from the Iron Age. And actually we have the window. And we have a lot of pottery and many, many jars with stamp impression on the handles, a formal stamp impression of belonging to the king, or the rosette from the time of King Josiah, or from the Persian period. I wrote a book on these things. And it was a real amazing palace, but we know that, when we excavated, that around the palace there was a garden, huge garden. And the big question was, what was growing in the garden? Because we know that in the ancient Near East, gardens were very important. You know what is the Hebrew name for garden? Gan. Garden is gan. It's coming from the root to keep, to guard. Even today, a teacher for kindergarten is ganenet. He's guarding them. What is the name for garden? Also in Babylon, in Akkadian, this is the name. What is the name for garden in Persia, in Persian language? Pardes. Pardes is the same word like gan, to to keep, to protect, because in the ancient world, you have huge gardens, but you had to keep them. Can you remember, for example, from the Bible about a garden that was well kept with a big wall, and there was one master who can decide there were many nice trees and many nice things in it, but he could decide who will be in and who will be out. This is the reason why when the Bible was translated to Greek, the translator chose to translate the name of the garden to paradise. And it became the name for, Garden of Eden is paradise. So I can tell Bob that we are the only archaeologists who actually walked in paradise, because we did it. So, the garden was amazing. We had, the people just removed all the rock from something like, let's say, 10 tennis courts. And it was kind of smooth, very nicely, and above it they put 1/2 meter of a garden soil, chocolate-like soil that they brought from the valleys. It was sifted, it was clean. The only thing is that when you excavate it, you want to put them some plants. So such a great, still soft and nice. Everywhere that we excavated, we found this thing. So this rock and 1/2 meter of soil, even it was covered later with different layers. And in it we found many installations for water, pools and tunnels. And you know that in the ancient gardens, they wanted to have that all the 5 senses will work. So you should see the nice thing, you should hear the water. So they had kind of small pipes that you can open and close, and the water could, go this. Today we have it with electricity that you can hear the water, floating. So they have this wonderful thing that they can open and have a kind of a small stream of water and flowers to smell, and all the senses should have worked. So we found everything, all this was really nice there. And we have channels and tunnels of water leading it from here to there. And, it was really complicated system and really amazing thing. But the question was, what was growing in the garden? What plants were there? Because if it was only, usual plants, okay. But maybe in the Persian gardens, Assyrian, Babylonian, they used to bring plants from all over the world in order to show how they are controlling not only the people, but also the nature. So we thought, and suddenly Daphne had a beautiful idea. Because we saw that on the main pools, they used to put layers and layers of plaster in order to keep the water. So Daphne had an idea. Maybe one day they just spread another layer of plaster, and it was spring. And all this pollen was in the air. And the plaster was still wet, and the pollen was stuck, to the wet plaster, and then the plaster was dry, and it kind of trapped the pollen. So we can take some pieces of the plaster, take the pollen out, we can date it very easily, and see what pollen we have there. So it was kind of a crazy idea, but she did it, and suddenly we started to get results. So we could see that we have grapes, but okay, grapes, we have in many gardens in Israel in the biblical period. We have figs, but okay, figs, okay. We also, a very local thing. We have poplar, which is strange, because poplar we have in Israel, but it's a tree that needs a lot of water. Usually it's only in the valleys where you have springs and everything. The same is cedar, coming from Lebanon. It's the only cedar that we know from Jerusalem in this period. Willow, which is, again, you cannot find it in Jerusalem, in the area. Birch, again, very strange, but then, okay, myrtles, which is very nice for garden because it smells very good and you can make nice shapes out of this bush. But then, okay, water lilies in the water. But then we found that this is the only place that we have trees, not only one, a lot of pollen, with trees of the Persian walnut, which is a very rare tree, was very important in the Persian tradition, maybe because it is kind of like a brain, or I don't know. And even the name of this Persian walnut, until now in Hebrew, is egoz. And it's a Persian name, egoz. So they took the Persian name, use it. You have it one in the Bible, in the Song of Solomon, that they're saying, I went down to the garden of egoz, of this tree. So beautiful thing, but then the big surprise was when we found a lot of pollen of one of the major trees that was there, and this is the citron. The citron is a tree that came from India and was very important in Persia. And even the name of the citron, etrog, is so important because it's Persian name. And it became one of the 4 kinds in Sukkot, in the tabernacle. It became very important in Judaism, but the first tree that came to Judah is in this garden in the Persian period in Ramat Rahel. So now you can go back to the Bible and ask, since when it's one of the 4 kinds of Sukkot? Since when it became so important? And again, many, many historical questions are coming here, and this is really important, and we can think about this garden. Is it a garden of the governor of the Persian time, maybe of Nehemiah? Is it the place that maybe is described in Nehemiah 5 as the place that Nehemiah was hosting all the important people? Because in Jerusalem we cannot find such a place, we cannot find such a nice garden. Now, with all this power, we came to Azeka. And now we're coming to the last part of my lecture, which is Azeka, because we came with all this power of new research. And we decided to make Azeka as a center for all these things in order to reconstruct the history of the site, of the lowland, of Judah in this time, because Azeka is well located just in the border between Judah and the lowland. Azeka is the border between the Philistines and the Judeans. Azeka is the traditional place, this line, that is between the mountain tribes and the coastal city-states, and in the biblical period, this is the border between the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Gad of the Philistines. This is the place of Goliath, if you like. So, we came to Azeka also because it's a very strategically located. Anyone who want to go from the west to Judah should go below Azeka. And this is a very important junction all the way between Azeka and Soho, going up to Jerusalem or going down to Hebron. And Azeka is again, very important from this perspective. And the main thing is that it was never excavated. Only in the 19th century, few weeks of excavations of British archaeologists that made some trenches, but in the last 100 years, this is the last major site in Judah that was not excavated. So we came to this site, which is very big, pear-shaped like this, very important, and we started to excavate it in 2012, which was a very nice season with nice people, also Iowa people, and it was 2013, again, nice excavation, and you see we wrote Azeka with people, and then in 2014 we had the war in Gaza, so we made the peace symbol. In 2015 we wrote in Hebrew letters. This is the letter of the biblical Hebrew, what we have in the seal impression, Lamelech, belonging to the king, with the people. But then in 2016 we had a big problem. We had a problem that really disturbing us for the excavation, because in the same time that we excavated, there was the Olympic Games. So people, really wanted to see the Olympic Games, but they had to excavate. So at least at the end, we made some kind of, thing that we made this Olympic thing. And in 18, last year, we started to have this symbol of Azeka, which we wrote Lamelech Azeka, and we also had a nice movie with the people. No, this one. And we had 2 nice jars that we wrote Azeka. And people were very happy with all these games that we are doing with our drone. And what I want to tell you is that during these seasons, Iowa was very important for us. Because many students from Iowa used to come to our excavation. And it was a really dedicated group of strong people, dedicated people. All the hard work was with these people. And in the center of these people was a weird guy with, not weird guy, weird t-shirts of the guy. And I know that he did all the hard work that we had in the excavation. But always with this tie, thing. But, he really knew how to work. And he did a lot of hard work, and also, great fun. Every pit that we found, every cave, every hole, everything, he was there. including a cave that is still waiting for him, which is probably the most important water reservoir of Azeka, a huge one, that is still waiting for being excavated by the Iowa team. He was not alone there. And all kinds of things that he taught us, how to rest in the breaks. And you can see very, very clearly that at least my son got this lesson. And I can tell you that, every time that we needed something, really hard to do, it was the Iowa team. Here we have some stubborn trees that we have to cut. So the Iowa team came. It was fun, but hard work to remove it. And you see that always the right heat in the right place, always was very important for us. And again, every time, this hard work was all the time with laugh and with, kind of good spirit. And you can see, the last hit, and then the tree can be removed. Only one of many, I think. Yeah, Bob was really strong then. And you can see that then this tree can go out. And I'm showing you this movie only because of the last 5 seconds that you will see in a minute. And then you understand why we need these guys from Iowa with our excavation. Because at the end of this, it's coming. This is also archaeology, what I can tell you. We cannot excavate. Yala is very Hebrew, as you see. Can I see it, thrown out down there? Let's go. Yeah. This one, yes. So, when this tree is going down, in a minute, now you can see the face of Bob and the reason why we need him in the excavation. Have a look. This one. This is the reason. And of course, again, every time that we have these huge caves, and we had a huge water reservoir that he excavated with my son and others. By the way, this I can sue you, Bob. This is my daughter. But you can see this cave that they started. This is the entrance. And here we have 4 meters, and at the end of the season, we celebrated on the bottom of it. And this is all the cave. You saw them sitting here. And all this cave was empty. We saw a cave, a water reservoir from the Iron Age with all the vessels. And Bob found that it was used in the Persian period to bury babies. And we found more than 30 babies that were buried there. And Bob, he was crying while excavating this thing because it was really hard. And now it's for the first time we know that in the biblical period, from every 6, 8, or 10 babies, 2 survived after the age 2 or 3. So now we know what was the destiny of the others. But of course, to finish such a thing, it was a big celebration. You can see here the stuff celebrating, this achievement. It was a real achievement. You see in the publication. And, it was a big celebration. But I can tell you that Azeka is a really important place. And we need, to understand the history because it's also a place mentioned in the Bible. It was mentioned in the book of Joshua and Samuel, so what I call the pre-monarch period. And it was mentioned by Jeremiah in the late Iron Age before the destruction. It was mentioned in Nehemiah and Chronicles in the Persian period. And we know a lot of it. I will not deal with it. We know a lot about Azeka from the biblical descriptions. Also, it was the place of the battle between David and Goliath. So the battle was between Soho and Azeka. So in excavations, people are coming hoping to find maybe, not the head, but, the rest of it may be in this place. And we know it from the Persian period, but also we have inscriptions from the Assyrian kings. We have a letter that was written by Sennacherib, and he's describing how he's coming from Gath of the Philistines, from Philistia, and he's coming again the province of Hezekiah of Judah. He doesn't call him the king of Judah. And he's coming to Azeka, his stronghold, which is between my border and the land of Judah. So Azeka is the border, as we know. And then he's describing how this is like a nest of an eagle located on a mountain ridge with amazing fortifications. And the walls are great. So this is all something that we are coming to excavate and to find. And then mainly, he's describing how he destroyed Azeka by means of beaten earth ramps and battering ramp brought to near the... And he's coming to Azeka and he's burning there, he's killing the people, and he's continuing to Jerusalem. So this is something that when you are coming as archaeologist, it's important to understand what you actually have there. But not only then, we know that also King Nebuchadnezzar was in Azeka. Because not only Jeremiah is describing that when the Babylonians are besieging Jerusalem, only Lachish and Azekah were left from all the cities in Judah, but also in an ostracon, a small piece of clay written with ink that was found in Lachish. In the destruction layer of Nebuchadnezzar, the people of Lachish are reporting to Zedekiah, the king of Judah, that let my Lord know that we are watching for the signals of Lachish. They mean the fire signals that they are having, according to all the indication which my Lord is giving, but we cannot see anymore Azeka. So Azeka was already, captured by the Babylonians. By the way, we are going to start excavating this season, this summer, the gate of Azeka from this period. So maybe we'll find the ostraka of the people of Azeka answering as well. Maybe they say, we just missed some matches and we cannot have the fire signals. Wait a minute, we are coming. So, who knows? But this is Azeka in biblical Hebrew, the letters of Azeka. So we have many historical questions that we can ask about Azeka, and with this we came to the excavations. And after these 6 seasons that we excavated, we know what is the history of the site. We know that we have early bronze and middle bronze and late bronze, and then we have Iron Age. And I will just show you in a few minutes what we know about Azeka and how these things are going together with the biblical information, and how with all the information that we can have a nice package of sciences and archaeological finds and biblical finds and historical understanding of the history of the site, of the region, and of Judah in many, many long periods. So what we know is that we have a site from the early bronze, let's say from 2500 BC. So it's a kind of something for 4,500 years before our time. What the connection between this and us? However, I will just show you one find from this very early period, because in one of the places that we excavated here, we found a floor, and in this floor, you see this floor here, and in this floor, you can see it here, we saw that something happened to the floor, that it was sunken. So something was below it that caused to the sunken of the floor. So we went very, very carefully and excavated the floor, and then below the floor we found the bodies of 2 donkeys, complete donkeys, that were buried under the floor. And we can see that both donkeys were very young, 4 months, so young donkeys, and the head was cut in a very brutal face and was placed 180 degrees, on the body. The 2 donkeys were laying one near the other with the 2 cut heads on them. So what is the relevance of it? Why it's important? What we can do with this information? By the way, and now we have 2 more cases of this same habit of buried donkeys. Now you should understand that donkey is a very important vessel, a vehicle in the ancient world. It was like your car. You take donkey is like a camel is like a truck. But donkey, it's like your private car. You take the donkey or the wheels, and you go to the field, and you go to the shop, and you go to the work. You have many donkeys, in Egyptian drawings, taking things. Until now, if you go, for example, to Petra, you will meet this way to go in and out. But again, you have it in many, many different drawings, understanding the importance of the donkeys. By the way, not all people know how to deal with the donkey. This is not the right way. And this is also not the right way. This is also not the right way. But this is the right way. So this you can see from the early 20th century, the doctor in the early Jewish settlements is going with a donkey and giving medicine to the people. This is now in the Galilee, in Israel. So people are still riding donkeys, and again, this is a problematic thing, but not only to go with it, but also to plow with donkey. Plowing is very important, donkey is very important for plowing, and you can see in many cases how donkeys were used in the hills, especially for plowing. However, since donkeys usually are in the field, in the roads, so usually you don't bury donkeys. And it became even in the Bible for a symbol of someone who is not buried. So like a donkey, the body will be thrown outside. We have it in the Bible in many cases. I have it in Hebrew. So even Jeremiah, when he want to give an example for King Jehoiakim, he's saying you will be like a donkey. They will throw your body out from the, near the road. You will not be buried. By the way, he was mistaken. Jehoiakim was buried. So usually you find donkeys like this, and not like horses that are really buried because it's important. The only two laws that we have in the Pentateuch, in the Torah, regarding donkeys are: don't plow with an ox and a donkey together. So Arabs are using it because the ox is stronger, donkey is, I know, but they use it, but it's against the biblical law. And the other thing, again, the other thing is a law that you should cut the head, la'arof, of every firstborn donkey. It's a must. Or you can replace it by a sheep or a goat. So when they can be sacrificed to God. This is a law, and it's amazing because until today, we have celebration in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish societies that they are bringing the firstborn donkey, and the rabbi saying, shall we cut its head or we replace it? And then they bring a small sheep, and they are replacing the donkey with the sheep. So kind of obeying to the law. So what I want to say is that we have some indications for this, the origin of this biblical law. And we can think who developed it, why it was developed, what is the origin of it. And again, many indications coming from archaeology in order to better understand the history. And then I'm coming back to Azeka because in the Milbron, this is already the Canaanite period, we have huge fortifications all over. And you can see here what a huge fortification where this is already the stone bases for the mud bricks that were above it. And all around Azeka we have a huge fortification of stones, base and mud brick. And you can see it all over, inner wall, outer wall, glacis, inner wall, outer wall, glacis. Even in some cases we have a burial of babies in jars inside the wall, and we can date the wall according to this. And you can see here what a huge wall we had, including in some cases we have the actual mud brick in courses still there from the 1800 BC. No, this is the date of the wall. And in some cases also in the last year we excavated the gate of this city, which is a huge gate. This is a reconstruction of the gate, how it was filled with a lot of material. I will leave the details aside, but you can see how big this gate and what is the location of this gate from the Middle Bronze. And then when I'm moving to the Late Bronze, again, this is Canaanite period, you see that we have a city all over the Tel. Everywhere that we excavated, we have these Canaanites, and we have them from the 15th century, the 14th century. We have them with a lot of Egyptian influence, with many Egyptian finds. Azeka, only after 6 seasons, is a place with the most of Egyptian finds from all sites excavated in Israel. I'm talking about different finds like this falcon and a lot of finds, and with unique cult. In Azeka we have cult of goddesses. And only in Azeka and the region around it, we found this goddess, and she's giving birth, and in the same time she has babies suckling. You see here the babies suckling, she's giving, so in the same time she's giving birth, you can see here how she's open, and here very, detailed vagina that she's giving birth, and she has babies. And in some cases when we have, this from Revadim, from nearby side, you have her face, so you can see she's not happy with all this. But this is again a card that we have in Azeka in the region, and maybe now we can understand why the big valley, one of the biggest valley in Judah, near Azeka, its name is the Valley of Elah, the Valley of the Goddess, and nearby we have a place called the Cave of the Twins. So traditions that are coming from the second millennium and, went for thousands of years about goddess, about twins, are, we can see the sources of them. And this is all coming with a temple that was there with a standing stone. And you can see here a Catholic priest, a Protestant minister, and a dog still worshipping this standing stone. A statue of the Baal. The Baal is sitting. You see that he has this, that it was stuck to a chair, and he was throwing, kind of the god of the weather. A lot of Egyptian finds, amazing finds with inscriptions in hieroglyphs, ceramic figurines, and other finds. And again, from this period, we have a lot of imported pottery and a lot of knowledge about this thing and the destruction that I showed you before. And what we can say that the destruction with this treasure of gold, the hands of my wife over there, and what she found here, and the dead people that we described before, we have a detailed information about all what we have in Azeka in this time. This only the pottery from one house, the storage of one house. This is the other pottery from this one house. This is the other pottery of one house. And what we know about it, we can reconstruct the place of Azeka in the history of the land. So we can say that in the late Bronze period, when the Egyptian ruled, Azeka was one more city in the region of the lowland, and Gath of the Philistine was the strongest one. But then, when the cities of the lowland were destroyed, suddenly new powers could rise, and in the 13th, 12th century, Azeka could be one of these powers that were in the land. Azeka and maybe also Lachish, but very soon after, and this is the reason for the destruction that we have in Azeka in the end of the 12th century, something happened. These two sites were destroyed. Gath came again, the big city in the region, and Azeka came to a long period of nothing there. After 250 years, when Azeka was resettled, we can see that the same traditions came back. So suddenly we have the same tradition. This is my son that he found it, kind of tradition that we have from the Canaanite period also in the new settlement of Azeka. And we have, after a gap, we have suddenly a Judean place. How can we know it? I'll just show you an example. We excavate from above. So above we have Persian period, nice village or town. We are removing this nice Persian village, and below it we have Iron Age, Judean settlement from the 8th century. This was destroyed by Sennacherib in 701, as we know from the inscription. We're going below it, and we go down below the 701 destruction to see what we have below it, and then we see that we have, this is the destruction, this is the destruction, the destruction, and below it we have nothing. We have a gap of 200, 300 years, all the way down to the late Bronze, to this 12th, 13th century BC, and we have a big gap in Azeka. So again, we know where we have destructions, we know where we have gaps, we know to reconstruct the settlement in Azeka for long periods. The only thing that I can finish my lecture with, because time is time, and I'm already late, is to tell you that the combination of all this is a real important thing for the history, not only of Azeka, but of all the region that we have there. And I just want to show you the summary that when we have, we are reconstructing the history, so we can reconstruct long periods when Azeka was part of Judah, when Azeka was outside of, when was it in outside of Judah? What was the history of all this region? So we are bringing back the archaeological indication, the historical analysis, the biblical side, the inscription that we have, and suddenly the picture is becoming bigger and brighter. And with this, we can go back to the Bible and ask many questions about the biblical description, when it was written, why it was written the way that it was written. And we have many more questions for the coming seasons, and I'm sure that Azeka will continue to give us a lot of indications of what we have. And I just want to finish with this and tell you thank you very much, and hoping that very soon in the coming seasons, we'll see more people from Iowa with us, and we'll have many more publications in Bar, in other places, and you can follow us in our website. You can follow Azeka in the website, and you should remember that archaeology is fun. Archaeology is of great importance for the history of the land of Israel, and we are doing our work there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oded. I think, thank you, Oded, for your lecture. Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
How are human remains handled in Israel under the law? Is there a sensitivity about them, or people like easier?
Could you repeat that?
Yes, the question is what is the how we deal with the human remains. So first of all, with great respect. And this for us very important. And again, unlike many archaeologists, tough people, most of our members are theologians, biblical scholars, historians, and we are less tough. We are not so happy when we are coming to destructions, and we're not so happy when we are coming to human remains. There are people that died, were killed, even if it was a long time ago. It's very sad. The Israeli law is very clear. We can deal with human remains in very archaeological, anthropological way, no problem at all. There are problems when politics is coming. So when suddenly ultra-religious Jewish people will come from all kinds of political reasons and will start to demonstrate, like they're doing from time to time, again, from political reasons. And the Israel Antiquity Authority, they have problems in some salvage excavation near ultra-religious places. But again, this is politics, it's not archaeology. In some cases where it's for the benefit of these ultra-religious groups, so they will take the bodies and will bury them somewhere, and in some cases they can stop the development of the excavation for 2 years. But we have no problem with it. All the remains are in our laboratories, well checked. Everything afterwards is stored according to the law in the national storages of the Israel Antiquity Authority. Everything is published, no problem.
Can I speak to that as well? Is that okay? Oded mentioned something that I wrote about, and I actually read part of that in a book reading. I think I read at either First Presbyterian Church or at one of the book readings I did. But one of the hardest things I ever had to do as an archaeologist was dig out that cistern. It was over 2 seasons. It was what, 11 weeks, 5 meters underground. And the first bunch of it was pretty good. But when I started getting the human remains, and then I started seeing the very small skeletons.
32 babies.
Yeah, and I'm starting working, and this is when I've got young twins of my own at home. And we know that we're dealing with a cultic site that celebrates twins. And I've got young kids at home, and I talk about this in the book. There's the scientific part of me that's trying to be a good scientist, trying to work through, this is my science. And there's the human part of me and the humanities that is just weeping. There's nobody down in this pit with me. I've got my headlamp on, and I'm just, I'm looking down, and I'm just crying through, and I'm thinking about, somebody. It's me reacting as a father to young children, and it is a struggle. Is working through I have to do my science, but somebody needs to mourn, and it's the natural reaction of a father, but somebody needs to mourn the loss of these children, because what they did with infants, with children during the Persian period was they threw them in a pit. That was the burial. There wasn't the attachment. If a baby died, there wasn't the attachment. They discarded them.
Think about these people in this time. There were big chances that your baby will not survive after 2 or 3 years. So again, 60-80% of the babies were died, until 2 or 3 years old. Every infection, every winter, Babies died. So I think that the attachment to the babies was different than now. And the relation to the babies was, and it's the first time that we found how they treated them, because we have no graves of babies, usually, that were found from the first temple and the second temple periods. So this is the first time what Bob excavated, it's the first time, and we should still think, we have it, we have the data, and we should still think how to publish it and how to deal with it and how to combine it with biblical laws and with biblical Jewish traditions. Maybe again, this is something that we should do together.
So every one of those bones are bagged, tagged, they're bagged separately, they're tagged, and they're sent to a lab, and they're treated respectfully, and they're dealt with that way. Other questions? Yeah.
So you had touched on briefly, you had talked about sort of sifting and finding new things, or you used computer mapping. Are you looking forward to, is there any future technologies or anything like that that you think might lead to some more things that you can see right now?
Yeah, I can tell you that from every bucket of soil, we can have now not as twice information as 10, 15 years ago, not even 10 times more information, hundreds times more. And this is making us, again, my generation, very humble. And I think that what I'm trying to do in my institute with the many excavation, my institute is excavation from Masada to the Megiddo, and from Azeka to the city of David. And what we are trying to say is that first we should dig very slowly, and we should do the best in order to get all the information. However, we should remember that in 20, 40, 50 years, the techniques will be much better. So from every area that we excavate, we should leave at least twice as much areas for future excavations. And we should leave a lot of data, including buckets of soil that we storage them for future analyze. And so we think about we are, I think, in the beginning of processes that will continue. And we should be very humble. Again, we should be very proud about the information that we can get. But we should be very humble, when we look what people can do in the future with the same techniques and with the same areas and with the same information that we have, but maybe 1,000 times more. So, yeah.
You talked about new methods of finding artifacts. What kind of methods are there of finding sites of undiscovered sites of archaeological importance?
So, first of all, I think that nowadays, I think that we have no many surprise in finding sites. So in many cases, we know what we don't know, and we know what we know. For example, we know that in the Jezreel Valley, for example, we have many sites that are let's say, 2000 BC, that are covered with 8 meters of mud of this Jezreel Valley, and only by chances when they have tunnels or roads, we'll discover them. We know, again, the limitation of archaeology. We have a very detailed information about all the sites that there is. I'm working in the Shfela, and now we have a very good mapping and understanding of all the sites from all the different excavations, but because we have now salvage excavations, because of development of all this area, suddenly we have new finds in the area like everywhere. But now, for example, we are doing a project in bringing together all the archaeological information in the north of Israel, in the Galilee, Jezreel Valley, all the north from the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom. And again, we're trying, the problem is not to discover sites, the problem is to bring the information. And now we have all the options to bring the information, to bring it out to the public, to make it open, to make it accessible. So again, the method of discovering site, not so much. We have kind of technology, but it's not. It's only in the surrounding of it. The problem is to get the information and to use the information for different studies.
There is a use of satellite technology, but that's being used more in South America.
Yeah.
basically just, they know where most of the sites are.
It's such a small place with so crowded and populated that in Israel we have no surprises. So it's the most excavated territory in the world. If you compare it to huge areas in the jungles of South America, so it's totally different story.
It takes 6 hours to drive from the Golan to the Aqaba. So how long does it take to drive across Iowa? That's how long it takes to drive the length, from the north to south. And it takes, what, an hour and a half to drive east to west, Israel? Not even?
It's in some cases it's 10 miles, so you should drive very slow.
So driving to the strip.
The problem is not the problem is that you have the border between Palestinian territories and Israeli territories, so the checkpoints can take you 2 hours. So it's 2.5 hours.
Any other questions? I know we're running a little over time. Oded, thank you so much for being here.